Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Thanks for joining us this Friday. First up tonight, geopolitics and your money. News that Israel has reportedly rehearsed an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities triggered a ripple effect of losses in the markets today. As soon as the story broke, oil futures spiked. Ultimately, futures rose $2.69 to settle in at about 134.62. And that, of course, spilled into the equity market. The Dow lost 220 points, falling below 12,000 for the first time since mid-March. Can we expect the Israel-Iran tension to settle down? Here to score it for us is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. He joins us on the phone from Denver. And we also have Steve Forbes, who is known for many things, not least of which is Forbes on Fox, which you can see every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on the Fox News Channel. Steve, first to you as we hook up Ambassador Bolton. To what effect did the markets collapse today, if you will, below the 12,000 mark? To what effect was that prompted by the news of Israel and Iran?
Well, I think any time it looks like Israel might strike Iran, you see the markets react. Oil got a huge spike several weeks ago when a candidate for the premiership of Israel said they got to go after it. And the feeling that Olmert, the prime minister, may fall if Bibi Netanyahu, the former finance minister and prime minister, gets in. He would certainly strike against Iran. So one way or the other, this issue is coming to a boil. And in the short term, the markets are going to be roiled. You think 140 is bad? What happens if it gets to 210?
Wow. Well, let's go to Ambassador Bolton now by phone. I believe he can hear us. Ambassador, it was 3 weeks ago that we first heard word of these so-called rehearsals for a strike in Iran. Why did we get so much detail now? Who put it out and why now?
Well, I'm not sure I would put a lot of stock in this. I mean, I think Israel has been prepared to take military action against Iran for about 5 years now. And the real issue is not these exercises, but the approaching end of President Bush's term, because if Israel is going to take military action, the optimal time will be after our election, but before the next president is sworn in.
But, Ambassador, we keep hearing time and again from some Israelis anyway that, hey, even if this is one of those cases where we're not going to look to Washington for the ultimate word on whether we take these nukes out.
I think that's right, but I think they also can look at our calendar the same way we do, and I think they would not want to do anything that could affect our election. I think that's why I say the optimal time for them is while President Bush is still in office, but after the election.
But, of course, optimal times are not always agreed to by Ahmadinejad in Iran, and we hear that there were 100 Israeli F-16s and F-15s involved in these exercises. What does that say to you?
I think it means the Israelis are very, very serious, just as they struck against the North Korean reactor in Syria on September the 6th last year because they saw it as an existential threat to their state. They're prepared to do the same against Iran.
And even though we have had some discouraging words about a potential Israeli strike of Iran, we had nothing, as far as I can tell, discouraging to say about their strike in Syria, did we?
No, and I think that was the proper course to take. If we're not able to deal with this nuclear proliferation threat, it's a benefit to the United States that Israel is.
By the way, as concerns that Syrian strike, there's so much information that we don't know. But is it clear to you that Iran had at least some hand in what was going on in Syria?
Well, this would be speculation, to be sure, but it's inconceivable to me that Syria would act that closely with North Korea without, at a minimum, Iranian acquiescence, and in my view, quite likely Iranian financing.
And we should mention, for those who don't know, Iran, I guess it's unfair to say they control Syria, but they have a lot of influence in what Syrians do, correct?
No doubt about it. Syria is moving towards satellite status vis-a-vis Iran, and I think that's why it's hard to believe Syria would have acted independently on a matter this serious involving a country like North Korea. You know, it's significant, I think. The administration's about to take North Korea off the list of state sponsors of terrorism, a dramatic mistake in my view, even as we see North Korea aiding a Syrian nuclear program.
Now, it's hard to find any silver linings here, but we do hear of talks between the Syrians and the Israelis. Should we be at all hopeful about that?
I don't think so. I think this is a matter of near desperation by the current Israeli government. I think, frankly, it's counterproductive to American efforts to try and isolate Syria and put pressure on that regime to cut its ties with Iran. If we have any chance of that, this Israeli move is not helping.
Okay, and finally, Ambassador, what happens if it happens? That is, what does Iran do if Israel strikes?
Well, I think Iran's options are actually fairly limited, and that's why this hysteria in the oil market is so unwarranted. Iran has to continue to pump oil. I don't think they're going to change that. I think they would look at strikes against Israel, but I think the Israelis know that. I think they're taking that into their calculus when they contemplate the decision to make a strike. Iran is already taking action against our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think we're prepared already for that. I think their options are more limited than the Iranian options are more limited than people think.
Even though they have control of a lot of organizations that do harm around the world, including Hezbollah, which they clearly control, if not 100%, at least the majority of it they control. I heard reports yesterday that Hezbollah may be planning to activate some sleeper cells in Canada.
Well, I think the Iranians, undoubtedly, as the world's central banker of terrorism, have a lot of options. But, you know, they've been utilizing those options already. And if they want to bring them to the fore, obviously this is a risk. It's why a military strike has enormous downside potential, and why I think we all believe the use of military force is a last resort. But compared to the alternative of an Iran with nuclear weapons, I think that's why the use of force has to be on the table.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the lesser of the two evils. John Bolton, Ambassador, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Always glad to do it.
Now.
Well, except I don't think anybody here takes it seriously. I mean, think about the notion. General Petraeus literally testified, and nobody in the Congress followed up on this. Iran is waging a proxy war against us. Yesterday, the military spokesman in Baghdad said the Iranian weapons are coming in to kill Americans and named the specific weapon. Yet nobody in our government has said, well, if they're killing young Americans, what is it we should be doing in response to the fact that the Iranian government's killing young Americans?
But what is the Bush administration doing?
I'm absolutely mystified. I can't imagine why they put up with this. I mean, either General Petraeus is wrong and the military spokesman's wrong, or the current policies we have are stunningly ineffective.
So what should we do? I mean, that's always the big question. We realize we have a problem. What should we do, and when?
We should finance the students. We should finance a radio-free Iran. We should covertly sabotage the only gasoline refinery in the country. We should be prepared, once the gasoline refinery is down, to stop all of the gasoline tankers and communicate to the Iranian government that if they want to move equipment into Iraq, they're going to have to walk.
That actually seems rather simple and easy to do. We're not doing that?
We're not.
Why aren't we?
Well, in 1981, Reagan said the Soviet Union was an evil empire. One of the things we did, we now know because it's been in memoirs and it's public source, is we built faulty natural gas pipeline pumps and got them sold on the black market to the Soviets, who thought they were buying this terrific new American technology. And in early 1982, there was an explosion in Siberia that was so big that it registered on the satellites as though it was a nuclear event. And one half of the White House was really worried until the other half of the White House said, no, that's our equipment. I'm just saying, once upon a time, we have had occasion when we were very clever and we got a lot done.